A Malaysian princess has just married a British racing driver. And at first, it looks like a pretty typical royal wedding story. Beautiful gowns, diamonds, a luxury hotel, traditional ceremonies. Everything you'd expect from a princess getting married. But there's one detail that changes the whole story. Princess Ilyana and Chris Froggatt knew each other as children. Yeah, childhood friends. And that's what makes this story so interesting. Because this wasn't a case of a princess meeting a racing driver years later and falling in love. Their story goes back much further. So who exactly is Princess Ilyana? Who is Chris Froggatt? And how did two people who knew each other as children eventually end up getting married in a royal ceremony? Let's go back to the beginning. Malaysia has one of the world's more unusual monarchies. There aren't just one, but 9 hereditary royal families. And their rulers take turns serving as Malaysia's king. Ilyana was born into one of those royal families, the Pahang royal family. Her father is Sultan Abdullah, the Sultan of Pahang. In 2019, he became Malaysia's 16th king, serving until 2024. So for 5 years, Ilyana wasn't simply the daughter of a sultan. She was also the daughter of Malaysia's reigning king. Her mother, Che Puan Julia Rice, came from a very different world. Before becoming part of the royal family, Julia was a Malaysian actress and model. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, she appeared in several films and became a familiar face in Malaysian entertainment. Then, in the early 1990s, she married Sultan Abdullah. After that, she stepped away from acting and largely stayed out of the public eye. Julia and Sultan Abdullah have 3 daughters, including Ilyana. And Ilyana's childhood was fairly private as well. She spent much of her early life in the United Kingdom, where her mother has primarily lived. She also attended Down House School in Berkshire. For years, she wasn't someone the public saw very often. She spent much of her early life in the United Kingdom, where her mother has primarily lived. She also attended Down House School in Berkshire. For years, she wasn't someone the public saw very often. That gradually changed as she began appearing at royal events in Malaysia. People started noticing her elegant appearance. And many couldn't help pointing out how much she resembled her mother. But there was one question people couldn't answer. Who would Ilyana eventually marry? Another Malaysian royal? Perhaps someone from another royal family? Well, the answer was neither. She married a British racing driver. His name is Christopher Lionel Froggatt. Most people know him simply as Chris Froggatt. Today, Chris competes in the GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup. But his journey into racing is actually pretty unusual. Most professional drivers start when they're children. Chris didn't. He was 24 when he first started racing. That's pretty late for professional motorsport. A friend invited him to a Ferrari high-performance driving event. And that experience sparked something. What started as an experience eventually became a career. Chris moved into professional racing, founded Tempesta Racing, and began competing internationally. And then came August 7, 2026. This time, Chris wasn't getting into a racing car. He was getting married. Princess Ilyana and Chris Froggatt were married at the Shangri-La Hotel in Kuala Lumpur. The celebrations lasted several days. And the wedding was, as you'd expect, incredibly elaborate. The first major ceremony was the Akad Nikah, the traditional Islamic marriage ceremony. The couple exchanged their vows and rings. Prayers were offered for their future together. And then, the bride appeared. Ilyana wore an elegant couture gown with delicate lace embroidery and a V-neck design. But the dress wasn't the only thing people were looking at. Her tiara immediately caught attention. She wore Queen Aziza's Art Deco diamond tiara, a historic piece dating back to the 1920s. And the following day, the royal reception was even more elaborate. Ilyana appeared in another formal royal ensemble. Another spectacular tiara. And a diamond choker from the Queen's collection. Chris, meanwhile, looked very different from the racing driver we're used to seeing. He wore traditional Malay attire, complete with a tengkolok headdress. And honestly, seeing the two of them together was quite a picture. A British racing driver. A Malaysian princess. A royal wedding in Kuala Lumpur. It looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. But there was still one question. How did these two actually know each other? Because Chris wasn't a stranger who suddenly appeared in Ilyana's life. He already knew her. And the answer came after the wedding. Sultana Haja Kalsam shared several old photographs of Ilyana and Chris. At first, they might not look like anything extraordinary. They're not formal royal portraits. They're not wedding photographs. They're just old pictures. Pictures of two young people. And then you realize. These are photographs of Ilyana and Chris when they were children. Think about that for a second. Long before the tiaras. Long before the wedding. Long before Chris's racing career. They already knew each other. Sultana Haja Kalsam had watched them grow up. And after watching them finally get married, she described their journey with a simple phrase. From playground days to wedding rings. And honestly, that's the part that makes this story so special. The wedding was spectacular. The diamonds were beautiful. The royal traditions were impressive. But the relationship itself started somewhere much simpler. They knew each other as children. They grew up. Their lives went in different directions. And somehow, years later, they ended up standing beside each other as bride and groom. It's also why people started comparing their story with another Southeast Asian royal couple. In 2024, Brunei's Prince Abdul Mateen married Anisha Rosna. Their relationship also had roots in childhood. Their families had known each other for years, and that early connection eventually developed into a relationship. So yes, there are some obvious similarities. Both couples knew each other when they were young. Both relationships eventually became romantic. And both weddings became major royal occasions. But Ilyana and Chris have their own story. Because in their case, the most interesting part wasn't something people saw on the wedding day. It was something hidden in their past. Those old photographs. 2 children. A friendship. And a future neither of them could have predicted. That's what makes the story stick with you. The wedding lasted only a few days. The flowers will eventually disappear. The cameras will move on. The tiaras will go back into royal collections. But their story? That started long before any of it. And remember the question we asked at the beginning. How far back did their story really go? All the way back to childhood. From playground days. To wedding rings. And now, after all those years, Princess Ilyana and Chris Froggatt are starting a completely new chapter together. Maybe they'll become one of Southeast Asia's best-known royal couples. Maybe they'll keep their lives mostly private. We don't know yet. But perhaps that's okay. Because the most memorable part of this wedding isn't the biggest tiara, or the most expensive gown, or even the royal title. It's the fact that long before the world was watching, they already knew each other. And somehow, years later, they found their way back to each other. Together. What do you think? Does knowing they were childhood friends make their wedding story even more special? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more royal stories from around the world.